Okay, so we want to spend a little time here going west of the Mississippi to look at some of what have become known as the Indian Wars in our nation's history. We saw already in the Indian removal talk that we did um, the five big tribes east of the Mississippi, and just really kind of the way those people were forced off of their land and moved to the west. What we're going to see is there's a little more resistance that is going to come from some of these tribes in the north and northwest, especially as they are confronted with this idea of manifest destiny. This idea that the United States was meant to stretch from ocean to ocean. And so these folks are going to have some of these same things to deal with. We already talked about the idea of really what had happened to these folks ever since Columbus arrives and meets the people that he would refer to as Indians, really kind of mistreating those folks and setting up a pattern that's going to be followed. And we said this is all done in the name of kind of what people felt like. We were meant to civilize the North American continent. To stretch from ocean to ocean. And you could either join our society, right, if you were one of those Native American groups, or you could get out of the way. And how either that assimilation or the removal is going to happen really to free up land in what we consider to be the southern United States today, but taking out, like I said, some of those big five tribes that were there at the same time. There's actually some connection to this in our own region here in Indiana. The battle over territory could be local, right? If you've heard of the Pigeon Roost Massacre that happened here in Scott County, or even in Indiana, right? One of the most famous of these early battles was something called the Battle of Tippecanoe. And Tippecanoe is just up north, kind of if you go to where Purdue is located in West Lafayette, go just a little bit north up there. Is where the battlefield is from the Battle of Tippecanoe. Basically, there was a Native American leader named Tecumseh who had taken the side of the British during the War of 1812 and was trying to get these different tribes of Native Americans in his own region to bond together to fight against the government of the United States. William Henry Harrison will send troops to try to take out Tecumseh and this Indian Confederacy, and it leads to a battle that will win favor for the Americans who are serving in there, and kind of spell the end of this Native American Confederacy. Got a great video I'm going to put up on the playlist that'll give you a little more insight into the Battle of Tippecanoe. But really, in Ohio and Indiana, these were hunting grounds for a lot of these folks. But again, as white settlers start to come in, there's going to be an interference with those life patterns. Same thing with Florida, with the Seminole Indian. We talked about them and Andrew Jackson. The big Indian leaders of the time, we've got a couple of them here for you. The guy in the middle is Sitting Bull. You may have heard of him before. He's a Sioux chief. Who is going to be at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Crazy Horse, the fellow on your left, on the left part of your screen, another Sioux chief, and then Geronimo, who was actually an Apache from the southwestern part of the United States. But all of these guys are going to be active leaders in the resistance against this movement into their territory of settlers of the Americans. Got a video I'm going to post for you of a monument that's actually being made to one of those men, Crazy Horse, out in the same area as Mount Rushmore. And so that is out there. There's another group that's building this Crazy Horse Memorial to kind of commemorate these Native American leaders who were out there. Probably the most famous battle of this entire period is what becomes known as the Battle of Little Bighorn. Little Bighorn was a stream or river that was out where this battle was fought. It was part of the Great Sioux War. Sioux was a Native American tribe. We're going to see a little bit more of when we see um, Dances with Wolves, as we look at that next week. June 25th of 1867. So 11 years after the Civil War has ended, a lot of these guys that are going to be fighting here are Civil War veterans, including the most famous Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, who's going to be the leader. This famously becomes known as Custer's Last Stand. And the history gets muddy. Basically, what has happened is Custer rides up upon a group of Native Americans, thinks he's got them trapped between a couple of hills and this creek of the Little Bighorn, and orders his small cavalry unit to attack. Problem is, what he doesn't see is on either side of the hills to the left and right of the tribe are more Native Americans. And so basically he leads his men into a slaughter. It's not until the rest of the army catches up that they try to piece together what happens. And for a short time, Custer is looked at as a hero, as a martyr for this cause. It's only upon further examination that you start to see that it was actually a military blunder that's going to lead to the death of many of his men, and so it kind of leads to a reputation change for him. Got another great little snippet on the Battle of Little Bighorn. I'll put up on the playlist for you as well. Another one of these guys, Chief Joseph, was a Nez Perce chief. If you remember, we talked about Lewis and Clark. The Nez Perce were a tribe that welcomed Lewis and Clark as they got out towards the Rocky Mountains, helped them on their journey. By the time the 1870s roll around, they probably wish they hadn't, because they're being pushed out as well. Chief Joseph was negotiating a treaty to try and end the Nez Perce War. Well, as he's negotiating with the United States representatives, some of the braves from his tribe sneak out, end up getting into a gun battle with American troops. And so the Americans are coming to get these guys. So Chief Joseph decides he's going to take his tribe, make a run from Nevada up through Idaho, hoping to escape into Canada. He makes this long trek, leads this army on a long trek. There's a great movie called "I Will Fight No More Forever" that tells the story. That's actually a quote from Chief Joseph after he is captured and forced to lay down his arms. He says, "I'm not going to do this anymore." They end up taking his tribe to a reservation, and years later, when Chief Joseph dies, on his death certificate, they put that he dies of a broken heart. That losing his people, losing their freedom, was more than he could bear. Probably the most infamous of these, are kind of the last battle in the Sioux Wars, is the Battle of Wounded Knee. It takes place in South Dakota. Got a great miniseries on HBO called Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. It's based on a book that is actually on your college-bound list. If you're interested in some of this stuff, may be one that you would like to check out. But the Sioux that are here, there's a group of Sioux, and members of the United States military are sent to disarm them. When they go to disarm them, something happens. It gets lost in history. What happened, who fired first, what was going on. But a battle rages. At the end of smoke clears, 350 people are dead, 120 of them Native American men and women. And so it becomes known as the massacre at Wounded Knee. But basically, after Wounded Knee, the government will round up the rest of these folks and send them to reservations. And as you explore in your Native American project, one of the things you'll see are these reservations being places of high poverty rates, unemployment rates, high rates of alcoholism, and so it's, they aren't really, until you see, even the idea of putting casinos on those things, you see a little more prosperity coming into the tribe, but not a great environment for these folks to raise families in, that sort of thing that's going to be there. And what we see is this is really the end of this plains culture, of this Native American culture of just being where you are, moving, kind of nomadic culture, those sorts of things. And you see Native Americans now confined to these reservations or leaving their tribes, leaving that heritage, and going and trying to assimilate into white society in a very similar ways to what we saw with the tribes to the east. Like I said, I'm going to include several things on the playlist here for you to take a look at to give you a better idea of the specifics of some of these battles. Some of these you may run across again as you do those tribe projects. The Apache, the Sioux are great ones to pick if you're looking for a group to pick for that project.